So this is a test. We definitely upped the budget with this one. It's time to get into Bible study. So basically, we are here today to talk about Exodus. Exodus is a quite shorter story, and it basically is following the creation of Israel and its people, like taking it from a tribe at the end of Genesis to like an entire body of people or group of people. We're following the story of Moses and how Moses released all of his people from slavery out of Egypt into the promised land. Genesis is like a bunch of different tales that are kind of sometimes not exactly connected, but kind of following the generations of Abraham. Exodus is one tale. That is Moses and his people and how they came to be in Egypt and how they eventually escaped Egypt. So I have my handy dandy notes that I took from Exodus just to help me, because I did read this a long time ago. So let's get into Bible study, y'all. Enough chit chat. Let me give you the tea. So basically, if you remember, we left off in Genesis with Joseph coming to be like the prime minister-ish of Egypt after his brothers sold him into slavery, yada yada yada. That's how Genesis ended, and Exodus picks up where Genesis starts off, but a few generations down the line. So if you remember, Jacob/Israel from Genesis, all of the sons, the like 12 different sons of Israel, multiplied and became the 12 different houses of Israel. Joseph is long dead, he's gone, and a new Pharaoh has come. He doesn't know anything about Joseph in the respect that the previous Pharaoh had, and he hates the Israelites. He hates the Hebrew people because they're too numerous in Egypt. He's just not with them. Can I curse? Anyways, a Levite man marries a Levite woman and they have Moses. A Levite is a house, one of the tribes in the nation of Israel. Now, when Moses was a child, the Pharaoh is like, these people are just, there's too many Hebrew people, they gotta go. So he orders to kill one son in every Hebrew family, and that would include Moses. And so Moses is hidden in this river and eventually found by the Pharaoh's wife. So the Pharaoh eventually enslaves the Hebrew people in Egypt. Then there's a little bit of a time jump where Moses kind of grows up and he feels for his people. Clearly, because they're enslaved. Essentially what takes place, one day there is this altercation. An Egyptian official is beating an Israelite. I guess I shouldn't call him Israelite exactly yet, but he's beating what will be an Israelite, someone under God's covenant, Hebrew person. Moses intervenes and kills the Egyptian official, which is a big no-no. Pharaoh's like, somebody get Moses. And Moses has to flee because otherwise he's going to get got. Moses took refuge in the land of Midian because he didn't want to be murdered by the Pharaoh for killing that Egyptian official. So, moving on. Moses meets the priest of Midian. The priest of Midian has 7 daughters, and Moses marries one of them. Eventually, the Pharaoh dies. A new Pharaoh comes. God hears the outcry of his people. What does God decide to do? I'm going to get my lick back. Not really lick back, but whatever. This is what God says. I'm going to get my lick back. And I'm going to punish Pharaoh and set my people free through you, Moses. While Moses is in Midian, God communicates with Moses and calls him to this bush, this burning bush, which I'm sure a lot of people have heard. Through this burning bush, God sends his spirit and is able to communicate with Moses. And he tells Moses, I'm going to use you to set my people free. I'm going to give you my power, essentially, through this staff. Moses is kind of scared. I think when we're told this story, you kind of think of Moses as this like fearless kind of figure, but in the text he's actually quite scared and is a little bit reluctant to do so. And so God instructs, okay, use your brother to help you because clearly you're just not getting with the program. So God instructs Moses and Aaron to go back to Egypt to set their people free, to negotiate with the Pharaoh, and they will use this staff to show God's power. Here is the famous part that everybody knows, right? The plagues. Moses returns to Egypt. He bargains with the Pharaoh and says, set my people free, for my Lord God says so. Otherwise, there are going to be consequences. And the Pharaoh is like, no, it's not giving that. So what does Moses do? He drops the staff and it turns into a snake. And then the Pharaoh's magicians do the same thing. and it's kind of this like spooky showdown. So the Pharaoh says, girl, no, like they got work to do. So then Moses uses God's staff and plunges it into the river, and the river turns to blood. Of all the plagues, there are 10 plagues, and these 10 plagues occur after each time Moses and Aaron try to bargain with the Pharaoh. First he says yes, changes his mind, and it's just this showdown. So there's 10 plagues in total. The first one is blood. The second one is frogs. Frogs that jump around Egypt and cause all this chaos. The third one is like vermin, bugs and stuff. These plagues were applied to all of Egypt, including some of the Israelites, until the third plague of like insects and vermin and stuff. Those were only applied to Egyptians. Third and fourth, the third vermin, the fourth insects. The fifth is like some epidemic to the animals, kind of like they all become sick and die. The next one after that is boils. I think you get the message. So, ow, my booty cheeks. The button came off. Hold on. This ain't the Oscars, is it? So yeah, I think you get the message. There were 10 plagues. Each time it just was kind of this same kind of tale. Moses and or Aaron would come to the Pharaoh, say, release my people after each plague, and he would say, fine, go, change his mind, and then Moses uses the staff to create one of those plagues. It just was escalating. So, the final straw. This is where it's real. I had to stop cursing. This is where it goes down. The last and final plague is death, like this spirit of death, is going to sweep Egypt and take the firstborn son of every household, unless there is the blood of a like young babe splattered across the doorpost, along with some other ritualistic stuff, which eventually will become the Passover rites, which Jewish people still practice today. I don't know if they still do that, but according to the Bible, if you want to remain in the covenant, you have to continue to practice Passover, and all of the rites are included in Passover. But we'll get into that in just a moment. The Pharaoh loses his son. A bunch of Egyptians lose their sons. It's just like death on a humongous scale. This was like the final straw. All of the Egyptians are like, y'all are just like, y'all gotta go because God loves you too much. He's causing all this suffering for us. Pharaoh, please. Pharaoh finally agrees to let them go. Moses and Aaron gather all their people and they all leave Egypt in this exodus. Of course, again, the Pharaoh changes his mind. Girl, like, and he decides to chase Aaron and Moses out of Egypt to bring that ass back. So y'all, there is this whole showdown, right? Essentially, Moses and Aaron reach the Red Sea. The Pharaoh and his army eventually catch up to Moses and all the Israelites. There's this big pursuit, right? And Moses uses the power of God through the staff to slam his staff into the Red Sea. He parts the Red Sea so that they may cross it. And they start to cross, and the Pharaoh and his army follow them through the passage. Problem is, God was like, it's not giving that. He sends down like these pillars of fire. There's earthquakes. And God is giving it up to the Egyptians. After the Israelites have finished their passage across the Red Sea, God closes the Red Sea, drowning the Pharaoh and all of his army. That is the most dramatic part and interesting part of this story. Now, this latter half of Exodus is actually a part of a much more bigger tale. It starts at the end of Exodus, all of Leviticus, and like the first third of Numbers. That is all of the covenant rules and regulations in the Torah. How to conduct yourself, how to remain in the covenant, what you can and cannot do, rites and rituals for cleansing yourself of sin, and it starts at the end of Exodus. First, I need to show you the map. I don't know where I'm going to put it, but you're looking right now at a map. This map is going to be the path that the Israelites are taking. The goal right now is to get to the land of Canon. This is like the promised land, right? There's a lot of stops on the way. And now we're focusing on the journey to Sinai. As the Israelites are traveling to Sinai, they face a lot of problems. Normal problems when you're traveling through the wilderness. They're attacked by animals, they run out of water, they become hungry, they're complaining to Moses. Essentially saying to Moses, why did you deliver us from slavery? Because we're hungry, we're starving, we're thirsty. We should have just stayed slaves, which eventually they arrive at Sinai. Mount Sinai is where Moses receives the 10 Commandments. or the Decalogue, or whatever you would like to call it. The 10 Commandments are actually not really the 10 Commandments. There's like a ton of commandments, but there's the 10 main commandments that most people are familiar with, which is like don't steal, don't rob, don't kill, etc. Moses actually receives much more rules and regulations through Leviticus to Numbers. Here's what we believe takes place. There are some narrative inconsistencies where we don't exactly know who went up the mountain, who went down the mountain. I will explain that momentarily, but here is the general story. Moses goes up the mountain of Sinai and receives the 10 Commandments as he communicates with God, right? These commandments are for the Israelites. They're intended for the Israelites, for them to remain in the covenant, and this is how they should abide and conduct themselves. While Moses is up there communicating with God and receiving the commandments, the Israelites have grown bored and hungry and over it, and they're just like, girl, like Moses, he's won. And they decide to construct this golden cow under the guidance of Aaron, which is Moses' brother, and they begin to worship this cow, this golden cow. Moses comes back down on the mountain. God himself has used his finger to transcribe all of the commandments on stone tablets and gives them to Moses. So Moses comes down with the tablets, and he sees them worshiping this gold cow. Little do they know that one of those commandments is going strictly against false idolship, because God is jealous. And Moses gets so tight and he smashes the commandments, girl. And then God kills half of the Israelites right then and there. It's over. Yeah. Awkward. So, and then, it's all fine, and they continue their journey from Sinai to Canon, and eventually God instructs Moses to build the tabernacle. And the tabernacle essentially is this like floating residence that contains the tablets and a place of worship, so that God can come down, or his spirit can come down, communicate with Moses so that they can worship him. This is the main general ending of Exodus, right? And here are some problems I have with this story. Some narrative inconsistencies, okay? The entirety of Exodus, there is a ton of proof and evidence that this is like a story of composite authorship, if you will. Here's the first glaring inconsistency. God reveals his name, which is Yahweh, to Moses in Exodus. I'll put the scripture here, but God says something to the effect of, I didn't reveal my name to your descendants like Abraham and Jacob and Isaac, but I'm revealing my name to you, and my name is Yahweh for the first time. The problem is that's not exactly true. When you're reading the Bible in Genesis, God does reveal his name. Another big inconsistency is in Mount Sinai. You don't really know who went up the mountain, who went down. If you're reading the Bible, you can definitely derive that Moses most likely was up the mountain. The thing is, one verse he's instructed to go up the mountain, but how can he go up the mountain if he already is up the mountain? Next one, it says that he's down, and then it's just like this dance going back and forth. When you read the Bible, like as if it was a movie, it does not play out really. There's some inconsistencies on who exactly went with Moses. Besides this, it's a very interesting tale, right? I think it's quite dramatic. There's lots of fire and plagues, and there's frogs jumping around. All the animals are dead in Egypt. Like the slaves are finally free. There's pillars of fire. The Red Sea parts. They're traveling through the wilderness. But girl, we have to get into the morality of this story. When I was reading this, I kind of was thinking, what is the whole purpose of this story? No shade, everyone is suffering from these plagues, except eventually the plagues are only really applicable to the Egyptians, and the Israelites are kind of protected under God's protection. When you're reading Exodus, you start to see God say things like, I'm going to harden the heart of the Pharaoh. I'm going to make him say no. What is the purpose of making the Pharaoh say no? Why don't you just make the Pharaoh say yes, so that your people can be free sooner rather than later? My questions were quickly answered. If you look at Exodus, I think it's 9, I'll put the verse here, you'll see God like explicitly say that this is all a plot. This is the whole reason I'm doing any of this, so that the Egyptians will know my power, know that I'm the true God. Word will spread that I am this all-powerful God who did all these miracles in Egypt. You'll be free, and I'll be of this like crazy renown. We have to get into the morality of that, right? Is that the kind of God that we have come to know today? Is this the God that Christians worship? This whole plot is unnecessary. God could have just softened the heart of the Pharaoh and delivered his people. Instead, he wants to be worshipped and wants to be famed. They're causing this massive suffering. It's all fabricated. All this suffering, all this pain, all these plagues, just so that they'll be like, yeah, God, he ate that. It's like, girl, like that's cruel. Often when you're growing up, this story seems like so legendary and you're just kind of like in awe. But then when you kind of sit back and think about it, it's like, and especially if you read it, you're like, what the hell? Like, it's just like unnecessary. Furthermore, when we start to think of the end of Exodus, a part of Leviticus and Numbers, God here starts to reaffirm what exactly constitutes the Israelites being a part of the covenant or rejected from the covenant. And there are a ton of rules. Some of the rules being the infamous Decalogue, which is the Greek way of saying the 10 Commandments. But there's a whole bunch of commandments, actually. What's funny is I'll talk about this point a lot in Leviticus, but I'll briefly touch on this. The reason sometimes I reference Christians, even though I'm talking about Exodus and kind of the covenant, is Christians believe in the 10 Commandments. Jesus affirms the 10 Commandments and says that's how you should live your life. The thing is, the 10 Commandments, canon-wise, according to the biblical text, are only intended for the Jewish people. The Christians believe in the 10 Commandments. So therefore, you can't really separate, you can't, as a Christian, you can't say, I don't believe in the Old Testament. You believe in Adam and Eve, in the creation of the world. You take part in the 10 Commandments. So you kind of have to take all or take none. You can't just cherry pick what you want to believe. If you choose to believe in the 10 Commandments, then you also need to choose to believe all of the commandments. You can't just choose the 10 that you like the most. The thing is, I don't think that even Jewish people are following all the rules, because some of them are a little outdated and kind of barbaric by today's standards. Like all of the rules for Passover, all of the rules for the different sins you commit. We'll get into that in Leviticus. The Passover was established in Exodus, right? The rules for Passover are a little intense. I really am curious if people are doing that today. Right, so I think that's the end of Exodus, no shade. I want to talk about some stuff, but it's really Leviticus. Leviticus is where we're going to really get into it. Leviticus is like I would say the central chapter where a lot of the conditions for the covenant reside. Actually, a lot of Jewish children start their studies with Leviticus because all of Leviticus is like what you can and cannot do, basically, and how to go about X, Y, and Z. Leviticus is going to be a much longer video because of this. There's a lot to go through. It has a lot of weight. Has a lot of verses that we need to analyze. So that's the end of Exodus, essentially, guys. I know it was a short little video, but I think today I'm also going to upload the whole why I'm doing this. I don't want people to think that I'm actually on here giving legit Bible study. I'm coming for this religion. I'm deconstructing. The camera's cute. I hope it wasn't blurry this whole time, but yeah, y'all. So bye. He doesn't see ya. Good enough. No. Is it blurry? Is it recording? Yeah, it's recording. Okay, period. He said that I'm good enough, but I'm not. Think about shit that I shouldn't. Wait, what was I talking about? I kind of forgot.